Hello E1 gamers and welcome to another episode of War Thunder Strat Guide. I am your host Ethan Knight. Please feel free to check out our official trailer. It was released earlier this month. Also check out episode 1 to War Thunder Strat Guide, as it would be important to watching this episode, which is episode 2 of that same series. Episode 3 will be coming out soon, I imagine within the next week. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to receive new guides, reviews, news, and much more. You can view our videos on your computer, tablet, or smartphone.
It's just like, man, you got to have that time where you just like disconnect from the scene, just the race. Like, and it's a race that I've created in my head, you know? But you have to step away from it.
So when I first started this game, I actually did the German forces, as you'll see here in my tech tree. Let's go to Army, because I want to focus in on the tanks first. That I have unlocked a lot as far as getting past rank 3. And guys, this was seriously a grind in the German tech tree because there's just so much in their tree. And I figured that the Germans were going to be the ones with the highest tech because Hitler was always about bigger is better. And that's what you'll find is a lot of heavy tanks and big guns in that tech tree. But the grinding in there is very tough. So if it's something you're considering doing, just know you will have a long grind getting down to rank 4 and 5, which I have honestly almost failed to do in the last 2 years of being able to play the game when I had time and grind out as much as I could. Besides that, I wanted to start this with American forces, and so I did a lot of grinding on their tech tree as far as tanks go, a little bit on their aircraft as well, and you'll see that most of rank 1 is unlocked. Sometimes I will just skip over some of the tanks that I know aren't going to be so much of a need as far as grinding and getting to the higher ranks, because you're just kind of wasting your time as far as and resources as far as trying to unlock a tank like that. Now, where this would come in handy would be, say, if there is an event or a tournament going on where there was only rank 1 vehicles allowed, and this vehicle was one of those ranks, and several of these other vehicles were not part of those ranks in that event or tournament. So, but in any case, it wouldn't take you that long to unlock something like that. The other thing about unlocking these vehicles is you start with absolutely basically no modifications. So the other part of the grind is not just trying to get to your next vehicle, but some modifications are very important, and all of this will be explained as well for which vehicles and which modifications should be your early on grinds to make this vehicle be able to help you in your grind towards the next vehicles. Modifications are very important when in game, and a lot of that I can explain later. What I want to explain to you guys now is just my setup, because what I want to do is I want all you new players out there, and it doesn't matter if you're doing the American forces, you have the German forces, the USSR, Russian forces, you have Britain, you have Japan, you have Italy, and now even France has come along. So these last 3 nations had not been in game until the last few updates over the past year, Japan being the first, and they just kind of been constantly adding new content to the game for a while now, and they've even gone as far as when you get down to the very last ranks, adding some of the more modern type vehicles. So this game is constantly going to be growing from a World War II game all the way into modern warfare. I'm sure that the sky is the limit in their means of what they plan to do with this game, as it has been a unfinished game realistically for a long time now. I'm not even sure how many years. Maybe in the comment sections you guys can let me know. I'm thinking it's 5 or 6 years this game has been in production. They've done pretty well so far. I see a lot of people kind of complain about things here and there, but Gaijin has been somewhat forthright and justified in their dealings with any kind of bug reports or complaints from their players. Typically, eventually, things get fixed, but they are working on a lot of different things, so I just hope people don't give them too much of a problem, because they are doing a great job so far. And just the layout of the game, I think, has been excellent. But let me not ramble on about that. What I want to show you guys is, again, doesn't matter where you want to start, except for these last three, Japan, Italy, and France. You're not going to have much to grind there because these nations have just recently come out. For instance, you have Japan, and they just don't have a very large tech tree at all. Several vehicles missing, things like that. I mean, feel free to grind that out if you want, if you think that you like that nation for some reason. There's something that's telling you, but you'll see here that in fact Italy has very little to offer at the moment. Just a couple tanks so far. But then you go to France, and there are a few things. But guys, honestly, these nations, I haven't looked too much into this, but these nations didn't really have a lot going on at that time. You know, Hitler had just kind of swept through Europe pretty quickly, so I'm kind of surprised to even see, you know, what I'm looking at here. Sometimes what Gaijin will do is they'll add tanks from other nations to kind of fill in the gap, as if they were captured or something like that. That way gameplay from nation to nation is a little bit more balanced. They try to balance things out as best as they can between the nations. One thing that I've heard after I started grinding out Germany for a good while was that the Russians have some of the best artillery in their arsenal. Mainly, a lot of people are saying that they're overpowered, their vehicles are, and they're pretty heavily armored as well. So there's been a lot of complaints about the USSR tech tree for Russia. If I had known this, then I probably would have started the game grinding out Russia. Now, I did grind out a little bit with Russia, as you can see here, just reaching rank 3, so I'll grind on that a little bit more later, because what I eventually want to do is get to rank 3 with all nations. That way new players, I mean, as a new player, it's not that hard, honestly, to get to rank 3. What the real grind is from rank 3 into rank 4, rank 5, and rank 6. That's where it becomes very difficult to open new tanks, and the tanks just get better and better. But you also have to realize each time that you go into a match, typically you're going into a match with other players who have vehicles according to the rank that you're using. So if you use say a very heavily rank 6 now, they have a rank 6 now, tank, you're not going to be put in with players that are using rank 1 tanks, not unless maybe they had a rank 1 or 2 tank in the mix of their rank 6s, and they just so happen not to be able to spawn in with any other vehicle except for that vehicle, which was a low rank, and they forgot was in their lineup. So what I want to kind of go over with you guys a little bit more is just the lineup, and again, I'm going to do this with the United States. I have just recently started playing with the United States, but being an American citizen myself, I just felt like it was what I wanted to do to start this YouTube channel, give a little nationality, some pride, and some patriotism for the country that I'm in. So, and I figured that, you know, all the research I'm about to do on all these vehicles will really play into effect on that nationality and the pride that I have for the United States of America. So anyway, without any due regard, let's start. Okay, so starting on the topic of the lineup that you see here, basically the main vehicle that you will have in this sort of lineup is going to be your M18, the gun motor carriage. It is a tank destroyer. It carries a 76mm M1 cannon, which is pretty good for heavy armor. What really helps that cannon is the fact that it carries some APC rounds as well, which are very highly penetrating rounds against armor. And we'll go into this a little bit more on each vehicle a little bit later in another episode. Right now we're just going to discuss the lineup and some strategy. So, and really what's the most important thing is the strategy behind your lineup. And what needs to be understood if you haven't played the game or you're very new to the game and then haven't played very much is we'll be looking at realistic battles and mostly and I don't think I'm going to do a lot of arcade. I just don't honestly like the arcade feel. As a Call of Duty and Battlefield player on PlayStation 4, I'm always a hardcore player. I don't really like people to see me on a mini-map, if at all, if I'm able to get away with it. And I just feel like things are more realistic in that sort of mode, in that sort of setting. So, you know, versus arcade where everybody can be seen where they're at all times. It's kind of ridiculous to me. So you'll see that in this lineup anyway, that I try to get one of each vehicle as far as what my strategy is going to be. And the reason why this this tank destroyer is so important in this tech tree is for there's many reasons, honestly. It's really fast. That's being the main reason. It's very fast and it goes 45 miles per hour. So what this is technically used for, and as far as my lineup, we'll go into customization so that you can see it better. This is basically I use it as kind of a runner, either a rush to a capture point if I'm playing a capture point based scenario. Usually that's what these games consist of. I don't really know of too much else, but domination mainly is what I use this as far as rushing to the first point I can get to. And the reason behind that is because you get there typically faster than anybody else at 45 miles per hour, and rushing up there and capturing that point really helps a lot in the way that you gain more spawn points. And the way that this game works is that you gain spawn points, and if you're killed early on, you're not going to be able to spawn in unless you have a vehicle that's really cheap to spawn in, and usually that's your SPAAs or your anti-aircraft vehicles. And so it's very important that you try to get and rack up as many points as possible early on in the game. Now there are a lot of players though that come in with heavy tanks from the get-go. I mean, just heavy tanks right from the start. So, and with this particular vehicle, it's only going to take mainly one shot at this vehicle to kill it. Mostly because there's just not a lot of armor. Now green is for, and yellow are your lowest amounts of armor, and red are your thicker parts. But if you get hit in this gun turret, you're still going to be dismantled as far as being able to shoot your weapon. And then also things are pretty tight in here as well. This isn't a vehicle that I typically worry about anything like the amount of ammo, but more skilled players, say like in heavy expensive tanks, they'll actually minimize their ammo loads, because if a shell penetrates through here and hits one of these, typically it'll blow up, catch on fire, that sort of thing. And so this is really a one-hit target here. There are a lot of skilled people that know that, and then they know that, and they know that they can take a sloppy shot on you, and I've had rounds bounce off me and be very surprised. But more than maybe 9 times out of 10, you're going to get hit and you're going to die. And I don't want to spend too much time on explaining these vehicles, so again, we are going to go into further detail a little bit later in another episode. But this is also not just a base rusher, it's also a good sniper. And the reason is because it can go across the field in a flank position on the map and basically take a position and sit there. And that's why you see that I've put these camouflage bushes, because I like to get in some bushes and kind of sit there and wait for a passing tank and maybe shoot him in the side. And that usually can be a one-shot kill. but if you're using your APC rounds, then you may just need to target the extremities, things like the engine or the gun mount, things like that, and then it may take a couple more shots. Armor piercing rounds, they typically pierce through and don't do a lot of damage, sometimes even passing all the way through, so it's always good to hit something in the extremities of the vehicle. That's why they show you these kind of statistics, the x-ray, the armor, things like that. Okay, so you have your M18, who is going to be your front tank. Everybody else is typically coming in with heavy tanks. They're a little bit slower. You have other people that are strategists like myself that will be base rushing too. So if you're in a map where there's only one capture point, it's probably a better idea to use this tank to flank versus capturing that point. Although the main thing that makes this a great capture tank is the modification that you can add later down the road. It's an M88 round, it's a smoke round, and I'll show you video of this, guys. It's really a great round to provide cover as far as smoke if you're rushing towards a base that you think there might be some hostiles on. Okay, we know that the main point of this lineup is to first rush a base or rush to a flank to get some kills. That way you get your spawn points. Alright, well, what happens if I die? Once that I've gained these points, that's where the rest of our lineup comes in. Your number one choice should be that once you've captured a point, you leave the point of capture and you go and flank an enemy position. Once you've flanked an enemy position, hopefully you get a kill or two. It's not always going to happen, but if you do, you just rack up more points. The more points you rack up, the better your possibility of getting into an aircraft. Your number one goal should be to get into an aircraft. Now, I've chosen the A36. A lot of experienced players are probably going to ask me about this, but they did just actually add a modification to this airplane for it to have 4 more, it's a gun mount, 4 more 50 caliber Browning machine guns, giving it a total of 10 machine guns. So that makes this a pretty heavy fighter at this point. And this is also a rank 2. I had the P51 for rank 3, but once the gun mounts came in, I was like, no, I need to advertise this plane. This is a new thing in the newest update 1.77 that they just released, and so it should be advertised as such. And just to give you a good view of that aircraft, that's what it looks like. It's pretty nice looking, and it's been doing a lot of seal clubbing. You might ask, what is seal clubbing? Basically, seal clubbing is fighting against other players and just being able to take them on head on and just wipe them out with no problem at all. It really has made this plane something special, and I wouldn't be surprised if Gadget were to upgrade it into a rank 3 position or something like that in the tech tree. Not so sure about their history of upgrading vehicles in that sort of sense. Your other option, though, is the B25 J-20 Mitchell. This is a great bomber. In realistic battles, you're not going to get your bomber sight. You actually have to change your views to look down into the bomber sight. And this, I find, is one of the best airplanes in the ranks that's going to be able to take out with bombs, because you can carry actually 4 500-pound bombs. It also has a 1,000-pound bomb. And I've played plenty of games as well, guys, where I've used this strategy to go base rush maybe the A point on a map when you have A, B, C points, and I capture the point, I go flank, I get killed right away, and it's still so early in the game that when I whip out this big guy right here, and all those guys are sitting there trying to capture that B point, with the, the strong emphasis not to hit friendly units, but to strategically drop those bombs in places where the enemy's going to be. They're going to be at the B point, and they're going to be on the outer edges coming in, and you'll know if they're inside of that circle or not based on your HUD display at the top showing you a capture point is being captured by an enemy team. So, and they just typically will load up as well. On some of those games, in some of those maps, you might have 4 or 5 tanks loaded up on B point, and you can easily get 2 or 3 kills just by dropping some 500-pound bombs or maybe a 1,000-pound bomb in one area near the B point. So that's why this comes in as a very important part of this lineup. But you also see that it has a lot of turrets and defensive mechanisms. It's got front guns as well, so you can take on other fighters, bombers, things like that head on. You're not going to have the greatest maneuverability, but you have 50 caliber Browning machine guns pointed in all kinds of directions, and you can and it is suggested that you change your view to the gunner position, because even if you have your crew upgraded all the way up, it's not really that great as far as the AI taking control of those guns to protect you. But just make sure you're not taking control of a gun and crashing. Usually the game automatically will set a sort of default autopilot once you switch into the bomber position or the gunner position, which is great, but it's not always going to tell you if there's a tall building or a tree in your way. So make sure you are elevated to a sense of good degree anyway. Moving on, so once you've gone to the M18 and you've dropped your bombs in a B25, or you've done the A36, this is more of a plane, honestly guys, that's good at dogfighting. If you see other enemy craft have popped up too early on in the match, go ahead and get in there and do some air defense, because the last thing your team needs is the enemy having air superiority, because that is a big deal in this game, believe it or not. Air support and superiority is a big deal. If there's not any aircraft and you can't somehow jump into this one, this plane is good at hitting targets. It's gonna dismantle, it's gonna do some penetration depending on weak spots that might get hit. But it is also great to just hit targets anyway with these 1050 cal machine guns, because you're pinpointing enemy positions on the map. When you hit something from the air, people know, hey, there's something over there. That guy in the sky is showing us there's something right here. So they're rushing over there to get a kill, trust me. But it's always, again, better to do the B-52. If you have enemy fighters come in, I've gotten several kills on aircraft just with the rear turret itself, and it's just kind of a lot of fun to fly anyway. And so you're sure that you'll be able to rack up a lot of points here with the B-52, and once you do and you're shot out of the sky, you can move into phase 3. What is phase 3? So in phase 3 on the lineup, I've got 2 different vehicles, and the reason for this is they're both heavy tanks. They're ranked a little bit lower than each other, but sometimes in a match I may not be able to afford this M6A1 like I want to. This is it's a pretty decent tank. We'll talk a lot about that more a little bit later, but I've got this premium vehicle as well, and the premium vehicles, guys, it actually reps you faster. So if you decide to buy a premium vehicle, just know that it's kind of worth it in the end as far as your grinding, because the biggest thing it does is it reps faster. If you play with this vehicle, you're gaining a lot more rep than, say, any of these other vehicles. So the only other way to kind of balance that out, and what I've done, is with my M18 that I'm always starting with, I've gone in here under modifications and I've purchased the Talisman. The Talisman vehicle allows you to gain 100% RP when controlling it. So and that's like a permanent thing, guys. So if you know you're going to use a vehicle all the time, kind of the same strategy all the time, this is a great way to help you in your grinding to gain extra RP. Basically, once we've rushed, we've bombed, we have 2 choices as far as what our results look like. You may find that you can only spawn in to an SPAA, which is fine because you can actually rack up a lot of points with these. Guys, my SPAA right here, this is a combination of a 37 millimeter M1A2 cannon and 2 Browning 50 cal machine guns. And basically, there's a lot I can say about this. I mean, I love this vehicle for a lot of reasons. Of course, there's some downsides, no armor, things like that. But as far as SPAAs go, we can talk and discuss about this a lot more in the future. You may find, though, that this is your last chance on the match and you're only halfway through the match, or you may be slowly approaching a match. Either way, you can still rack up a lot of points, and I've seen it where I've gone into, instead of a phase 3, I've been put into a phase 4 where I was forced to play with this SPAA. I'll shoot down a couple aircraft or something like that, or I might shoot down an actual light armored tank, because sometimes when players are from the rip, they're going with their heavier tanks. Once they get killed, they're downgrading into lighter tanks and things in their lineup. So towards the end of the match, you typically have lighter armored vehicles, and this 37 millimeters and the 50 cal machine gun are going to do wonders with that. Besides that, you have, so let's just say maybe you go into there. If not, it doesn't matter. Your phase 4 plan is always, or should always, lead you, if you're successful, into your heavier tanks. And what are you going to do with the heavy tanks once you're in there? Well, a lot of times, if the match is real even, then you're fighting for a B point. And if you're going in at the end of a match, or even in the middle of the match, and you have a heavy tank, more than likely you're going to be outdoing pretty much anybody else on the field. So be embarrassed if at the end of a game you come out with a heavy tank and get destroyed. You're probably getting destroyed, though, by the best player on their team, who hasn't died at all and just had come out with his heaviest tank and lasted through the whole match, which might be an unfortunate scenario. So I'm coming up to the end, guys, of the time that I have. So this is my lineup, and again, the next episode we will show all of these vehicles in much more detail, so that you guys get a clear understanding of what it's like to grind quickly through War Thunder. But not only that, have a lot of fun with the game and get a lot of kills and rank up through the ranks. And maybe you can share this information with your friends, family, whoever else you have. Maybe you have a clan or something like that, a group that you like to play with. And this is some really helpful information that I didn't have when I first started the game.
Now it's just like, man, you got to have that time where you just like disconnect from the scene, just the race, like, and it's a race that I've created in my head, you know, but you have to step away from it.